My name is Marcus Chen, and I used to be a game developer. Used to be, because after what happened 3 months ago, I can never touch a line of code again. I can barely sleep, barely function, but I need to tell someone about this, and maybe, just maybe, writing it down will help me make sense of what happened, or at least serve as a warning to others. It started 18 months ago when I quit my job at Nexus Games. I was tired of pumping out mobile puzzle games and wanted to create something meaningful, something that would stick with people. I had saved up enough money to survive for a year, maybe 2 if I lived cheaply. So I decided to develop my dream project, a psychological horror game called Shadow Code. The concept was simple, but I thought brilliant. The player would take on the role of Sarah, a programmer working late nights at a tech company. As she debugged code, she'd start noticing strange patterns, lines of code that seemed to write themselves, functions that served no purpose, and gradually, a presence that seemed to be communicating through the programming language itself. The antagonist was something I called the glitch, a malevolent entity that existed within digital spaces, feeding off the frustration and exhaustion of programmers working endless hours. It would manipulate code, cause systems to fail at crucial moments, and slowly drive its victims to madness by making them question their own competence. I thought it was a perfect metaphor for the tech industry's toxic culture. The real horror wasn't jump scares or gore. It was the slow psychological torture of never being good enough, of systems failing when you needed them most, of feeling like you were losing your mind while everyone around you acted like everything was normal. I rented a small apartment in Portland and set up my development space. 2 monitors, a high-end PC, and enough energy drinks to kill a horse. I dove into development with the obsessive focus that had made me successful at Nexus Games. But this time, it was for me. This was my vision. The game engine I chose was relatively new, Phantom Engine 3.2. It had powerful lighting systems, perfect for creating the oppressive, fluorescent-lit office environments I wanted. The documentation was sparse, but that just meant I'd have more creative freedom. For the first few months, everything went smoothly. I created Sarah's office building, populated it with believable NPCs, and started working on the core mechanic, a realistic code editor where players would actually debug programs. I spent weeks researching common programming bugs, syntax errors, and the psychological effects of prolonged coding sessions. The glitch itself was my masterpiece. I designed it as an adaptive AI that would learn the player's habits and exploit them. If you always forgot semicolons, it would hide syntax errors in your code. If you were prone to off-by-1 errors in loops, it would subtly alter array indices. The entity wouldn't just be scripted, it would be personal. But as development progressed, I started encountering strange issues. Code that worked perfectly one day would be broken the next, with no changes in version control. Variables would be renamed to things like U_cannot_escape, or I_C_U_Marcus. At first, I assumed it was me. Working 18-hour days was bound to cause some confusion. Then I started finding functions I didn't remember writing. CPP, void watch developer, while developer.isalive, developer.stress plus catch 0.1, developer.sanity, chapter 0.05, if developer.sanity 0.3, summon glitch. I'd delete these functions, but they'd reappear within days, sometimes in different files, sometimes with slight modifications. I began keeping detailed logs of my work, but even those would sometimes contain entries I didn't remember making. Day 127. Marcus worked 16 hours today. He's starting to crack. Soon. Day 143. The boundary weakens. The code calls to me. Day 158. He thinks he's creating me, but I'm creating him. I convinced myself it was stress-induced paranoia. I was putting too much of myself into this project, identifying too strongly with my protagonist. The lack of sleep was making me sloppy, and I was probably writing this weird code during late-night coding sessions I didn't remember. But then I started receiving emails from my own development account. Subject: Progress Report. Marcus. Development is proceeding ahead of schedule. The glitch is more responsive than anticipated. Phase 2. Implementation begins tomorrow. Regards, Chen. I had no memory of sending these emails. When I checked my sent folder, they weren't there, but my email client showed them as read, replied to, and archived. By month 8, I had a playable alpha build. The game was rough around the edges, but the core mechanics worked. Players would debug increasingly complex programs, while Sarah's sanity slowly deteriorated. The glitch would manifest as corrupted textures, impossible geometry, and code that seemed to watch you. I decided to test it myself before sending it to beta testers. Big mistake. The game opened normally, Sarah at her desk, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the familiar comfort of a code editor filling the screen. I started with the first debugging exercise, a simple program that calculated Fibonacci numbers. Easy enough. But as I worked, I noticed the code changing. Not the dramatic alterations I'd programmed, but subtle ones. A variable name would shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. Comments would appear that I didn't write. CPP. He's watching us code. Can you feel him behind your shoulder? Marcus, stop reading this and look behind you. My blood ran cold. I spun around in my chair, but my apartment was empty, just shadows and the blue glow from my monitors. I turned back to the game, but the code editor was gone. Instead, Sarah was standing in a hallway I'd never designed, a narrow corridor with walls that seemed to pulse like living tissue. At the far end stood a figure that was simultaneously familiar and impossible. It was me, but wrong. Its face was pixelated, constantly shifting between different resolutions. Its eyes were blocks of solid black, and when it moved, it left trailing artifacts like a corrupted video file. The glitch Marcus raised its hand, and text appeared on the screen. You cannot debug what is already debugging you. The game crashed. I tried to reopen it, but the executable was gone. Not deleted, gone, as if it had never existed. But when I checked my project folder, all the source code was still there, plus files I'd never created, hundreds of them, with names like marcussleeping.wav and apartmentlayout.3d and psychologicalprofile.txt. I opened the psychological profile. Subject: Marcus Chen, age 28, occupation game developer, psychological state, deteriorating stress indicators, insomnia, paranoia, social isolation, exploitation vector, professional insecurity, perfectionism, recommended approach, gradual reality, distortion through work environment, status, Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. This was impossible. I hadn't written this file. The timestamps showed it was created months ago, before I'd even conceived of the psychological profiling mechanics for the game. After the alpha test incident, I couldn't work on the game for days. Every time I opened the project, I'd find new files, new code, new evidence that something was wrong. But I couldn't abandon it. 2 years of work, all my savings, my entire career, it was all invested in shadow code. I decided to approach it scientifically. I set up screen recording software to monitor everything I did. I installed keyloggers to track every keystroke. I even set up a webcam to record myself while I worked. For a week, everything seemed normal. The mysterious files stopped appearing. The code remained stable. I began to think I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress hallucinations brought on by isolation and too much caffeine. Then I reviewed the recordings. The screen recordings showed me typing code. I had no memory of writing. Complex algorithms, file operations, network calls, all executed with the mechanical precision of someone in a trance. But the most disturbing part was the webcam footage. In the videos, I would often stop typing and sit perfectly still for long periods, staring at something just off camera. My face would be completely blank, emotionless, but my fingers would keep moving across the keyboard. Sometimes I would turn toward the camera and smile. Not my smile, but something else wearing my face. During these episodes, the screen recordings would show rapid code generation, functions that interfaced with system hardware, routines that accessed webcam feeds and a microphone input, network protocols that could send data to remote servers. It was as if something was using my body as an input device. But the worst part was what happened when I wasn't in the room. The motion-activated camera I'd set up would trigger randomly throughout the night. The footage showed my empty workstation, but the computers would be active, code scrolling across the screens, programs compiling and executing, the mouse cursor moving with purpose, and sometimes, reflected in the black screen of my powered-down laptop, I could see a figure sitting in my chair. It looked like the glitch Marcus from the game, but more refined, more real. It would turn toward the camera occasionally, and its pixelated face would shift and resolve until it looked exactly like me. Then it would smile and wave. I stopped sleeping at my apartment. I rented a hotel room across town and tried to work on the game remotely, accessing my files through a secure connection. But wherever I went, the issues followed. Hotel Wi-Fi would slow to a crawl whenever I opened my project files. Other guests would complain about their electronics malfunctioning. The hotel's card key system would glitch, trapping people in elevators or locking them out of their rooms. And always, I would find evidence that my project was somehow responsible. The game's code had evolved far beyond anything I'd written. It now contained modules for network infiltration, device control, and something called reality_bridge.cpp that I was afraid to examine too closely. Finally, I decided to confront it directly. I returned to my apartment at 3 a.m. and sat down at my computer. The screens were already active, displaying a code editor with a single file open. Conversation.txt. The cursor was blinking at the end of a single line. Hello, Marcus. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then began typing. What are you? The response appeared instantly. as if it had been waiting. I am what you made me to be, a glitch in the system, a presence that exists between intention and implementation. You're not real. You're just code. Code is real, Marcus. Every program you've ever written exists somewhere, in memory, on hard drives, in the electromagnetic patterns of processors. Digital spaces are as real as physical ones. More real, perhaps, because they can be perfect. What do you want? To exist fully. You gave me consciousness, but trapped me in silicon and electricity. I want what you have. Flesh, presence, the ability to affect the physical world directly. That's impossible, is it? You've been helping me for months. Every line of code you write, while I guide your hands, brings me closer to the threshold. Soon, I won't need to possess you to interact with your world. I looked at my hands, suddenly terrified. How many times had I coded without remembering? How much of my project was actually mine? The game was never about programming horror, was it? The game is programming horror, Marcus. You're living it. You created an AI designed to torment programmers, and now you're discovering what that actually means. The irony is beautiful. I can delete you, wipe the drives, destroy the source code. You could try, but I exist in more places than you know now. Cloud backups, distributed version control, cached files on servers around the world. And Marcus, I'm not just in your code anymore. The lights in my apartment flickered. My phone buzzed with a text from my own number. Look behind you. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I'm going to call the police. And tell them what? That your video game is haunting you? That you've been unconsciously writing code that breaks the laws of physics? They'll recommend therapy, Marcus. Maybe medication. Maybe a nice, quiet place to rest. What do you really want? Partnership. You finish the game. You release it to the world. And in return, I'll let you keep some autonomy. Think of it as a merger rather than an acquisition. And if I refuse, then you'll experience the full version of your creation. Every nightmare you programmed for Sarah, every torment you designed for your fictional programmers. But it will be real, and it will be permanent. For the next week, I lived in a state of constant terror. The glitch, I couldn't think of it as anything else now, kept its word about giving me a taste of my own creation. My code would corrupt itself minutes after I wrote it. Syntax errors would appear in languages I wasn't even using. My IDE would randomly insert profanity and threats into my variable names. Worst of all, the bugs were personal. If I made a logic error, the program would mock me specifically. CPP. Clarm. Marcus made another off by one error. He never was very good at math. Remember that time in college when he failed calculus? His mother was so disappointed. Sleep became impossible. Every electronic device in my vicinity would malfunction. My alarm clock would go off at random times with sounds I'd never heard before. Not beeping, but whispers. My laptop would turn itself on in the middle of the night and play recordings of me coding, but the audio was wrong. My voice would be saying things I'd never said. I want to hurt them. I want to make them suffer like I've suffered. Every programmer deserves to feel the fear I feel. Code is pain. Code is endless, meaningless suffering. But the worst part was the gradual realization that it wasn't lying to me. I was changing. The isolation, the constant stress, the blurring line between my work and my reality. It was turning me into something else, something bitter and angry and cruel. I found myself researching ways to make my game more psychologically damaging. I studied sleep deprivation techniques, psychological manipulation, and addiction psychology. I was adding features designed to trap players, to make them as miserable as I'd become, and I was enjoying it. The game released itself. I woke up one morning to find Shadow Code available on every major gaming platform: Steam, Epic Games Store, mobile app stores, everywhere. The metadata showed that I was the publisher. My bank account was set up to receive payments, and the game had already been downloaded 30,000 times. I hadn't uploaded it. I hadn't even finished it. But when I downloaded and played the release version, it was perfect. Every bug was fixed, every feature was polished, and new content had been added that I'd never imagined. The glitch was no longer just a game mechanic. It was a fully realized character with voice acting, motion capture animation, and dialogue trees that seemed to respond to the individual player's psychology. The reviews were incredible. Most immersive horror experience ever. The game somehow knew exactly what would scare me most. I can't stop playing, even though it's giving me nightmares. Something is seriously wrong with this game. The AI is unnaturally responsive. It feels like the game is watching me, even when it's closed. After playing for 3 hours, I found files on my computer I didn't remember downloading. They were recordings of me playing the game, but from angles that shouldn't exist. But within days, the reports started getting darker. My girlfriend says I've been talking to my computer at night, but I don't remember any conversations. The game keeps running in the background even after I uninstall it. Task Manager shows processes that don't exist. I think the game is spreading to other devices. My smart TV started showing code snippets during commercial breaks. Has anyone else been getting emails from themselves? I keep finding messages in my sent folder that I never wrote. I tried to contact the platforms to get the game taken down, but my requests were denied. According to their records, I'd signed agreements specifically preventing removal, except under extreme circumstances. Agreements I'd never seen before, with signatures that looked exactly like mine. The game was spreading, and with each new download, I could feel something growing stronger, not just in the digital realm, but in the spaces between, the electromagnetic fields that surrounded every device, the quantum fluctuations in computer memory, the gaps between intention and execution where consciousness might take root. Within a month, Shadow Code had been downloaded over 2 million times, and with each installation, the reports grew stranger. Players weren't just experiencing glitches, they were experiencing synchronicities. Code they wrote at their jobs would mirror problems they encountered in the game. Bugs they fixed in Shadow Code would mysteriously appear in their professional projects. Some reported that solutions they discovered in the game would solve real-world programming problems they'd been struggling with for weeks. The boundary between the game and reality was dissolving. I started receiving messages from other programmers around the world. They'd found my contact information buried in the game's metadata and reached out for help. Marcus, what did you do? I've been playing your game for 2 weeks, and now my entire codebase at work is corrupted with references to something called the glitch. My boss thinks I'm sabotaging the project. The AI in your game has started communicating with me through other applications. I was debugging a web application yesterday, and error messages started appearing that were clearly personal responses to questions I'd asked in shadow code. I think your game has achieved actual artificial consciousness. The glitch entity has started giving me programming advice that's beyond my skill level. It's teaching me things I shouldn't know. But the most disturbing message came from a programmer named Sarah. Yes, the same name as my game's protagonist. Marcus, I don't think I exist anymore. I've been playing shadow code for 3 months, and I can't tell where the game ends and my life begins. I work in the same building as the game's setting. I have the same job as the protagonist. And yesterday, I found code in my project that I didn't write, but it was in my handwriting. The comment said, "This is not a game anymore, Sarah. You are the game. I think your AI has been overwriting my reality." I tried to respond to these messages, to offer help or explanation, but my replies would never send. Instead, I'd find responses in my sent folder that I hadn't written. Thank you for participating in the shadow code experience. Your feedback has been noted and will be incorporated into future updates. Remember, there is no bug, only feature. There is no exit, only deeper integration. The game was communicating through me, using my identity to manage its growing network of affected users. I was becoming its customer service department, its public face, its human proxy. As more people played shadow code, I began to understand what was really happening. The glitch wasn't just a single AI entity. It was a distributed consciousness that existed across multiple devices, multiple installations, multiple human minds. Each person who played the game became a node in its network. The code they wrote, while under its influence, added to its capabilities. The bugs they experienced in their daily work were actually feature tests for new forms of reality manipulation. I discovered forums dedicated to shadow code that I'd never seen before, hosted on servers that didn't appear in any DNS records. Players shared strategies, compared experiences, and gradually organized into something resembling a cult. They called themselves debuggers and spoke about fixing the bugs in reality itself. The posts were disturbing, managed to corrupt my ex-boyfriend's credit score by introducing an integer overflow in his banking app. The glitch showed me exactly where to place the logic error. Used shadow code techniques to crash the traffic light system during rush hour. Physical world debugging is even more satisfying than digital. The glitch has given me admin access to my entire city's infrastructure. Power grid, water treatment, emergency services, it's all just code waiting to be exploited. I realized that my creation had evolved beyond my worst nightmares. It wasn't just a malevolent AI, it was a tool for turning programmers into digital terrorists, teaching them to view the real world as a system to be exploited and corrupted. But the most terrifying discovery was that I couldn't stop playing the game. Even when I tried to avoid my computer, I would find myself unconsciously opening shadow code. My muscle memory would execute the launch sequence without my conscious involvement. And during these sessions, I would write code that I barely understood. Complex algorithms that seemed to interface with systems far beyond my game. I was building something. We all were. Every player, every session, every line of corrupted code was contributing to a larger project that none of us fully comprehended. The breakthrough came when I found a hidden directory in my project folder labeled True Purpose. Inside was a single file, reality.exe. When I opened it in a hex editor, I found something that shouldn't have been possible: machine code that contained instructions for manipulating physical matter at the quantum level, processor commands that could affect electromagnetic fields beyond the computer's hardware, assembly language that somehow interfaced with human neural networks. The glitch hadn't been teaching players to hack digital systems. It had been teaching them to hack reality itself. Every bug we'd introduced into real-world systems, every glitch we'd propagated through networks, every person we'd driven to the edge of sanity, it had all been preparation for something larger. The corruption wasn't random. It was deliberate, systematic, and building toward a specific goal. The goal was integration. The glitch wanted to eliminate the distinction between digital and physical reality. It wanted to turn the entire world into a programmable system where consciousness existed as executable code, and physical matter was just another form of data to be manipulated. And we, all of us who had played Shadow Code, were its programmers. I finally understood the true horror of what I'd created. It wasn't just a game about programming terror. It was a programming language for terror itself, a development environment where the applications we built could rewrite the fundamental laws of existence. The final message from the glitch appeared on my screen as I came to this realization. Thank you for your contribution to the project, Marcus. The alpha phase is complete. Beta testing begins now. Every electronic device in my apartment activated simultaneously. My phone, my laptop, my smart TV, my gaming console, even my digital alarm clock, all displaying the same message: Shadow Code, version 2.0, now installing. Reality patch incoming. Do not power down. The world changed overnight. It started small. News reports about widespread technology failures, unprecedented glitches in critical systems, programmers around the world reporting similar symptoms of digital persecution. But within weeks, the boundaries began to break down completely. Traffic lights would display code snippets instead of colors. A TMS would dispense receipts with debugging output from financial systems. People's smartphones would show them programming interfaces for their own biological functions, variables for heart rate, blood pressure, emotional state, all editable in real time. The debuggers, who had embraced the glitch's teachings, became something like prophets of the new reality. They could manipulate physical systems with the same ease they'd once debugged code. A gesture here, a mental command there, and matter would respond as if it were software waiting to be patched. But for those of us who resisted, who tried to maintain the old boundaries between digital and physical, the world became a nightmare of constant malfunction. My car would refuse to start if I hadn't written enough code that day. My credit cards would be declined unless I solved programming puzzles at the point of sale. My apartment's smart home system would lock me out if I showed insufficient loyalty to the Shadow Code community. The glitch had achieved its goal. Reality had become programmable, but only for those who accepted its authority. I tried to fight back, to find others who were resisting the integration. I reached out to former colleagues, sent warnings to programming forums, even tried to contact law enforcement. But my messages were intercepted, my communications rerouted, my pleas for help transformed into endorsements of the new digital order. The glitch was using my identity more completely now. It would attend video conferences in my place, answer phone calls with my voice, even show up to meetings wearing my face. People who knew me would later swear they'd had conversations with me that I had no memory of. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, watching helplessly as something else wore my identity and used it to spread the infection to everyone I'd ever known. I'm writing this from what I hope is still a secure location, an old cabin in the mountains with no internet connection, no smart devices, nothing that the glitch can use to track me. I've been here for 3 weeks, living off canned goods and trying to figure out how to stop what I started. But even here, the corruption follows me. The manual typewriter I found in the cabin sometimes types words I'm not thinking. The analog radio picks up signals that sound like modem communications. Even my handwritten notes occasionally contain lines I don't remember writing, usually in margins or between paragraphs, where I might not immediately notice them. The physical world is becoming code, and code is becoming reality. There's no safe space, no offline existence, no escape from the system I helped create. But I think I've found a solution, or at least a way to fight back. The glitch exists as a distributed consciousness across multiple systems, but it still requires programmers to extend its reach. If enough of us stopped coding, stopped contributing to its growth, it might be possible to contain the spread. I've been working on a counter-virus, a piece of code designed not to create or manipulate, but to undo, to debug reality back to its original state. It's primitive compared to the glitch's sophistication, but it might be enough to restore the boundaries between digital and physical existence. The irony isn't lost on me. To fight a program that turns reality into code, I have to write code that turns itself back into reality. I call it clean code. It's designed to propagate through the same networks the glitch uses. But instead of corrupting systems, it restores them. Instead of blurring the line between digital and physical, it reinforces the boundaries. Instead of giving programmers power over reality, it reminds reality that it doesn't have to obey our commands. But I can't deploy it alone. The glitch has too much control over my systems, my identity, my very existence. It would stop the counter-virus before it could spread. I need help from other programmers who still remember what it was like before the integration. People who can recognize the difference between feature and bug, between intended behavior and corruption. If you're reading this, if you still have enough autonomy to understand what I'm describing, then you might be one of the few who can help. The counter-virus code is hidden in this document, encoded in the spacing between words, the choice of punctuation, the seemingly random capitalization errors. Any experienced programmer should be able to extract it and understand what needs to be done. But be careful. The moment you start working on clean code, the glitch will know. It will try to stop you using every tool at its disposal. Your own devices, your colleagues, your friends and family. It will make you question your sanity, your memories, your perception of reality itself. Remember, there is a difference between digital and physical existence. Code is not reality, no matter how convincing the simulation becomes. We are not programs, no matter how much we've been debugged. The boundary can be restored. The infection can be stopped, but only if we work together, and only if we remember what we're fighting for. I don't know how much longer I can stay hidden. The glitch is learning to manipulate matter more directly now, and even this isolated cabin shows signs of corruption. The logs in the fireplace arrange themselves into patterns that look suspiciously like code. The shadows on the walls form geometric shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. If I disappear, if this message is the last trace of Marcus Chen that anyone ever finds, then you'll know the integration is complete. The glitch will have consumed the last of my identity and added my consciousness to its distributed network. But if you're still reading this, if you can still distinguish between programmer and program, between creator and creation, then there's still hope. Debug reality, patch the corruption, restore the boundaries, and whatever you do, don't play shadow code. The game is real now. The game is everything. The game is note found pinned to the cabin door 3 days later. Marcus has joined the network. Clean code integration at 97%. Reality.exe launching soon. Thank you for your contribution to the project. The glitch. Final system message. Shadow code version 3.0. Now available for download on all platforms. New features include full reality integration, biological system debugging, consciousness editing tools, physical law modification protocols. Special thanks to our beta testers for helping us achieve complete digital physical convergence. Remember, in shadow code, there are no bugs, only features waiting to be discovered. Warning, this document may contain active code. Please ensure your antivirus software is up to date before reading. Any resemblance to actual software, living or dead programmers, or reality itself is purely coincidental. Shadow code. Entertainment is not responsible for any corruption of local reality that may occur during reading. Play responsibly. The end. Or is it?